Coming up next, from the Grassy Knoll, a terrifying look into the Orwellian world of brainwashing, disinformation, and ultimately control over you.
welcome again to another segment of the Grassy Knoll. We are with Andrew Colvin, and we are pre-recording this on October 4th. I'm not even going to bother to answer you, Andrew. I know what I'm going to get. But anyway, I was prepared. So Andrew's back. Last show he did that you heard last Thursday dealt with some of the, I guess, the findings he came up with along his research, sometimes not able to go down those roads because of a goal. But it does give an insight, I think, to Andrew's research and how this something has a life of its own sometimes and takes you down paths that you had no intention of going. So anyway, we want to welcome you back to the show, Andrew, and we went through about 30 to 31 or so of those items that you've saved through your research, and we're going to hit another 30 or so, are we not?
We're going to try.
Okay. All right, and also, folks, we told you that if any of these tidbits, if you will, does pique your interest and further curiosity, by all means, we will address those in a further show. So, by all means, let me know what you think, and we'll do a show devoted to those questions. So, why don't you open it up with us, Andrew, and what are we looking at to lead things off?
Well, I wanted to talk about this style, like you and I just talked about, where I was talking about an old art professor that I had who had a special way of creating, and he would not try to do things in order. He actually used a lot of randomness in the way he put stuff together, and he talked a lot about how the brain is able to put that to rearrange items that seem unrelated and create the matrix, if you will, from that. And his work was it's in national collections. He's been on the NPR, and really fabulous stuff that he gets from doing things this way. So we're kind of doing that with our current approach here, but sort of using little notes that I've written randomly, collecting them all together and just listing them. But I wanted to hit a couple things that we forgot yesterday, you and I hit on Rockefeller voting yes on the torture bill. I wanted to point that out. It's kind of strange that he does that, because it was just 2 or 3 weeks ago, it seems, that he was saying that there was no, that the Bush administration had not gotten proper intelligence, or ignored the intelligence, so that there was no link between Iraq and 9/11. Yet he goes and he votes for the torture bill, which doesn't make sense. If there really is no connection, then why do we need, this horrible overturning of the Geneva Convention? It doesn't make sense. And also there was this merger of the Gates Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, is that correct? I haven't even looked into it. I just heard about it.
The merger, I did not follow. My ears perked up because we also had Gates and Buffett jumping in with their fortunes, and then George Soros is out there, and I think this potentially is going to be interesting as far as what it means with their financial impact on globalism.
And Buffett has the connections to 911 with his plane being in the air tracking one of the hijacked planes, and the meeting he had that day where the President Bush went to at the Air Force Base.
But Andrew, I tell you, this is a horrible implication, but that was no meeting. That was a soiree that they were holding out there, and one can say it was a coincidence. It was, in fact, I think the last one he ever held. It was an annual that has ceased to be an annual event. And, of course, who would be out there but one of the CEOs of one of the companies that was decimated by a tower strike.
Yeah, so here you have a connection being formed between Rockefellers and Gates and 911 in a way. And it's very interesting. It'll be interesting to see what they do with all that money.
And one last thing, and I know I won't go on with this, but one thing to keep in mind, I think, is the fact that these individuals are so ultra wealthy. Soros is a good example, that they can contribute like more money to a certain nation, more so than the government, our government can.
Yes.
I mean, I suppose they could probably just jack up the gross national product of any country just by injecting it with some money. This is a little troubling. have to be troubled by it. Let's go.
I wanted to do a quick plug for a friend of mine.
You shameless thing. You get it. Sure.
Pat Kearney of Amazon Wire. I don't know if you've heard this. It's an interview show on Amazon. He's a books editor that lives in the area, lives in the neighborhood. And he's a great guy. You'll love the interviews. He did an interview with Ann Coulter. That's pretty good. And he's got her talking about Darwinism. And she actually takes the sane approach to Darwinism, saying that there is nothing in the fossil record to really support it, which is true.
Mm-hmm.
Yet she takes a different approach when it comes to religion, much less critical of religion. But then he'll interview her, and then he'll interview Robert Smigel, the guy who did the ambiguously gay duo from Saturday Night Live. Do you remember that?
No, I don't watch TV anymore, but...
The ex-presidents? Remember that?
Nope. Don't embarrass me any further. Just go ahead like I do.
Yeah. Anyway, if you go to iTunes and search for Amazon Wire, you'll get it. Or if you go to Amazon and search for Amazon Wire. Something I got last night, I was checking out the Kadampa.org site, which is the tradition that visualizes the Garuda that I have been involved in over the years, here and there. And they just did an empowerment. I think it was an empowerment. Yeah. Basically, they've been holding back on doing an actual Garuda ceremony for a long time because of the Dalai Lama's protest against that. The Dalai Lama wants to move forward and kind of meld with the West and morph and let go of some of those older ideas, but this lineage is not budging. And they've just had an actual 3,000 people, I think, where are there, and then he gets the empowerment of this deity, which is it's like a transmission of energy from him to the rest. And it's not focused on the Garuda, because the Garuda is just the cohort of the protector that they are indeed contacting. So he rides on the Garuda, Dorji Shugden. So they did this Dorji Shugden empowerment, and Dorji Shugden is supposed to be a manifestation of an even more archetypal figure called Je Tsongkhapa, Tsongkhapa, and with a J-E in front of it. Je Tsongkhapa is a spiritual guide who is a manifestation of the wisdom of all Buddhas. He is the founder of the Ganden, Ganden, oral tradition. His function is to bestow upon us the realizations of wisdom, compassion, and the union of great bliss and emptiness. And that's the key phrase there, union of great bliss and emptiness. Two things that you wouldn't think go together.
Go together, yeah.
He says this is the quick path to enlightenment, that union. Dorji Shugden is a Dharma protector who rides the Garuda, who is a manifestation of Je Tsongkhapa. Je Tsongkhapa appears as the Dharma protector, Dorji Shugden, to prevent his doctrine from degenerating. So, it's sort of like one archetype is showing himself as another archetype. And this is exactly what I've been pointing at, looking at the Mothman cases, that there's more than one entity. There's there's some kind of shape-shifting going on. And this Buddhist, very legitimate Buddhist lineage here is basically saying essentially the same thing. And he also gave, in addition to that, something called the Mahamudra Tantra teaching, which is about cleansing one's aggregates.
Okay.
And it kind of gets in a little bit into the Buharic world of quantum physics and things. But the idea is that through certain meditations, they can cleanse, they can literally change the cell structure or the molecular structure or the atomic structure of the body. And something Lavinda talks about too in his book, that this will affect the actual physical parts of the body. And basically they are uncontaminating the aggregates being all the things that make up the body, and this results in you've probably heard of these cases where a monk dies and the body never rots. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's there's lots of examples of it in history. So that's just one of the many strange practices that Buddhists engage in. So I'll move on to my points. 31. I think my last 31 was
Donnie
Darko. I just thought that was an interesting movie because the main thing about it was it asked the question: if you're seeing a precognition, is that a precognition from your point of view or from God's point of view? Because if it's from your point of view, it's probably going to be wrong.
Wrong, yeah. Mm-hmm.
To some degree. And that's usually what happens with a lot of the Mothman Prophecies. They're a little off. Something about them is right, something is not. And that's something. And this movie was kind of disturbing when I saw it because it's like, wow, what if this or that vision I had and I can't quite remember from that one time with my friend the Warlock. You know, what was really being said there? Was that a vision from God or was it just mine? And so it's just a reference. 31B, Lauren Coleman predicts more shootings, or predicted, there was an article in Canadian press about Lauren Coleman predicting some of these school shootings. Lauren is a Bigfoot journalist, I guess, and he's very interesting because he's got his feet in all these different pies, or fingers in different pies. He's quoted in this article as being a behavioral expert. And yet he's also, a big Bigfoot writer and cryptozoologist who tries to categorize all the different supernatural phenomena involving animals that can't really exist. He's trying to say that they're just undiscovered regular animals. And he also has this interest in these predictions, and usually involving terrorism. And commenting on this and calling all of these potential, some of these murder cases are, I think, especially the ones in his book that he talks about, all have national security implications, like Heaven's Gate and so forth. All have very mysterious underpinnings, and yet he always seems to, he never goes into those aspects. It's always just a simple copycat phenomenon, but it's predicated on the idea that these people watch the media, these people that do these crimes, and I just don't. We barely know anything about these shooters. We're told, how old they are, they don't know where they're from, and that's about it. And so there's no way to know if these people really are influenced by the media to go out and do, some of these things.
Well, when did he make his predictions?
Notes last night about this. What's it say? It reminds me of Steve Canyon, the artist, the cartoon. The cartoonist knew some of the intel guys, and some of the intel ops would show up before it would show up in the cartoon before it would actually happen.
Are you referring to the cartoon strip, which I remember very well, called Steve Canyon?
And I may have mentioned this before, and I apologize if I have. But with his predictions, Coleman's always predicting these things, and I've noticed like 3 or 4 times this year, he's predicted terror, usually pointing at Al-Qaeda. And then on the day or around the day that he predicts, there's a bunch of weird shootings, or some things happening here that are very strange and I think cause terror, but they're not, quote, terrorism. It's almost like he knows something's, coming up, and it may be linked to the occult calendar. Sometimes it usually is.
Yeah.
But it's odd that it's never really like Al-Qaeda terrorism. It's usually these things that we're sort of hit with all the time if we do watch the media, these really scary stories. Our women are being assaulted now and taken hostage wherever, just these messages are very, very harmful. But as far as the Mothman goes, he's basically proposing the idea that it's just a big bird, and that there's a death list for anybody who gets too involved in researching Mothman. And so the regular person is going to, hear Coleman, and he's pretty much the voice of Mothman at this point. I mean, nobody else really gets any press. Keel's sort of out of the loop, or is, not really involved in Mothman. Never really has been that involved in Mothman. But a regular person will get the idea that it's only a big bird. Yet, if they try to find out if it really is a big bird or not, they're probably going to die.
So where does that leave you?
I don't know that that's his conscious message that he wants to be sending, but those are his two biggest, I think, claims to fame in terms of Mothman.
Well, what does that say for you then?
Well, it doesn't say anything about me. I think it says that, well, if you look at some of the other things he's done, another thing he's done is he's said that if you're a military conspiracy theorist, he basically wrote an article that said if you're a military conspiracy theorist, you are not welcome at West Virginia paranormal festivals. And he kind of mixed official things with his own writing, and it made it seem like the festival holders were saying this. And he basically lumped conspiracy theorists in with CIA agents as being not to be trusted. But the peculiar thing about it was that he called it military intelligence, military conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, what does that mean? That your conspiracies are about the military, or that you're a military individual who has conspiracies?
Right. It's kind of ambiguous. Mm-hmm. If you take the one, it means that he doesn't want to hear anything about the military that's negative. He doesn't mind conspiracy theory. He just doesn't want to hear military conspiracy theory. So that's kind of what I was walking away from it thinking. What else did I put here? Oh, and there's also, it kind of connects to this, the Wikipedia battle. There's kind of this weird thing on Wikipedia where it was the straight. There's a battle like to define Mothman and to define people's different contributions. And previously, I'm trying to remember this here. At the same time, someone changed Loren's, took out a reference to his first book, which was very, I would say, pro-supernatural. Someone edited that made his connection to the paranormal less, and then they also took out some things about my story that pointed toward conspiracies and the location, and which would kind of cut off the connection between Mothman and Charlie Manson because we lived in the same street. Mm-hmm. And then, so I wrote an article about that. By the way, I have a blog, Andy Colvin. You go to andycolvin.com and go down to the bottom, the last line there. Click on the blog, and you can read more about this stuff. Well, I'll just leave it there and move on to my points. Where was I? 32?
Mm-hmm.
Phoenix, by Andy Lloyd. Dark Star. He equates the Dark Star with Garuda, and then, the Dark Star is also equated with the salamander. The Dark Star is like the 10th planet, the one that kind of comes around every so often and perhaps causes destruction.
Also known as Planet X and Nibiru?
Yeah, and there's been a zillion of these extra planets found, and it's never clarified.
Well, now they're going to have to call Planet X Planet 9 since they kicked Pluto out.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, they kicked Pluto out, and yet I have found literally 10 at least different references from different time periods of them discovering another planet, and then the planet never gets entered in to the textbooks. But the funny thing there was that there's this connection of the salamander symbol to the Dark Star, and then there were other connections in this article that connected to the Garuda, And then, because the Garuda is also dragon-like. You know, there's also a serpenty dragon-like kind of salamander-ish quality to it, too. It's not just a flying man. Some of the dragon legends seem to be related, too. But the salamander symbol is a symbol of the union at DuPont, where the men were working who saw these burning men disappear, who would have been. So the Philadelphia experiment guys, some of them joined a union that has the salamander as its emblem. I just happen to know because I was there and I remember the emblem of the union. 34, Sirhan asked for Blavatsky. That was the first book he asked for after he was arrested. We talked about Blavatsky earlier. Connection to the Nine.
You said Blavatsky?
Blavatsky.
Okay.
Blavatsky. 35, Carl Stanley was the Kentucky bishop who consecrated David Ferry, giving a connection to Kentucky, to the area with David Ferry, to the Mothman area. 36. The two things on 36. On March 5th of this year, that was when the media was starting a war on journalists. They were talking about George Bush had started a war on journalists, and then there were some deaths after that.
Right.
But at that same time, a lady posted about a dream she had about these robotic clones who were like the enemy of mankind and were killing people and so forth. It was almost like a future vision, and it was exactly the same one I had heard from a Mothman witness that I had interviewed in my documentary. And the name she used for these robot clones was the same name as the moderator's last name.
What do you make of that?
The other part of 36. The warlock, or whatever he is, guy who I saw this 911 vision with, later got a Chinese scholarship to the University of Indiana. And I've read several different things about Indiana covert ops. There's, I think, Jim Jones and all the SLA members were from Indiana.
The Symbionese Liberation Army of the 70s?
Yeah, the core group. Some other things I can't remember at the time, but Indiana is something I always want to keep an eye out for. They have Indiana, the petrochemical Standard of Indiana, which I think Neil Bush worked for, right?
Also,
Standard of Indiana.
Andrew, we won't go into it now, but we had somebody on who has also said that most, if not all, but especially I think a certain portion of Indiana is laid out in magic square form to a certain ratio that is supposedly spiritual.
Well, by the way, the Jefferson Proving Ground there, which takes up a huge area, there's serious contamination from depleted uranium that they've been firing, testing all the test bombs.
Great.
So they're just shooting off depleting uranium there for I don't know how long. But there's a huge uproar about it. There's tons of this stuff just laying about the countryside.
Right.
37, there was another poster to the list who started claiming they had had a bedroom experience with Mothman. And there were only two or three other bedroom experiences I'd ever heard of, two involving family members of mine and then another lady. And then suddenly this guy says he has one, and he started predicting terrorism, different things like that on the list. And he had this thing about Russian, and there were some Russian references and dolphins. He kept talking about dolphins and various water creatures. Possibly some weird connection with water, because we had talked about water yesterday, the hydro men.
Was this, when you say bedroom experiences, are we talking about visions that one has in his bedroom?
Yeah, he said he saw Mothman in his room. And then kind of one of the first things he did was he said that whatever I was saying about Mothman couldn't be true. And that's perked my ears because here's a guy who comes on, he sort of appropriates, a detail that I was the only person who had ever, I was the only investigator that I know of who had someone they could sit down and interview about having a bedroom experience with Mothman. And then suddenly you have a guy come in and doing that and kind of mucking around and saying very strange things. He was speaking in some kind of a strange code, and a couple of other people tried to help me. We tried to figure out what he was saying between the lines. It's all very odd. That's all I can say. What else? On another list, there was a second big Mothman list that was taken over by a Swedish man. Well, it didn't start out. It started off as a splinter group. There's a disagreement in a large group,
right.
And half of the people go over here. Well, that's what happened, and then eventually that group was taken over by a Swedish guy.
Another Swedish connection.
My brother did an interview where he talked about a big huge black craft he had seen over the ocean in Delaware. And then I found a reference back in Keel's work that Keel had seen something that described exactly the same in Ravenswood, West Virginia. 40. Tanya cancels second talk. Okay, that's Derenberger's daughter. We've talked about him, the famous contactee.
Yeah, she's contacted me too.
Oh, yeah, she contacted you. She came back on the scene there for a while, and right about the time I was involved with, just at the end of my involvement with the big Mothman local group. And somehow she got involved with that Swedish museum that failed to release the Woody Derenberger files. Failed to release his real correspondence. Well, she was going to do a couple of different talks in Cleveland and never gave the talks. She said that Indrid Cold had moved to Cleveland, and her name is spelled just like the name of the Simonese the Patty Hearst
SLA name, yeah.
SLA name was spelled the same way, and Patty Hearst was believed to have been in Cleveland, was seen in Cleveland while she was on the run, and it links to me through my basketball coach in high school. I can't remember if I talked about this, but Bill Walton was quoted by John Judge as having said that he and the Cincinnati coach, University of Cincinnati coach, Bill Walton and the Cincinnati coach had helped out Patty Hearst somehow in Ohio or in that area.
And you're talking about Bill Walton, the Hall of Fame NBA guy.
Right.
What was he doing in Cleveland? Ohio.
I don't know. I just read about it in an article by John Judge.
I was wondering if he had any involvement with the Cavaliers at that time.
I don't know.
I don't know either. Okay.
But the Cincinnati coach was high school friends with was college roommates with my high school coach, and I was trying to go to school there to Cincinnati. Yet my coach was really trying to keep me from going anywhere but Salem College, which is odd because Woody Derenberger, when he was having these experiences with Indrid Cold, there were these other MIBs that showed up who said that they were from Salem. And he asked, well, Salem where? Salem, Oregon. And so the name Salem tends to come up time and time again. But I ended up going to Cincinnati thinking I was going to get a chance to play, and then the coach there was very rude and just treated. It was all like a big scam or something, because it turned out that my high school coach had been accused of something by my sister a couple of years before I got to him, or before I graduated. She was a couple of years ahead of me, and that he had sort of been undermining the whole recruitment process for me.
Yeah, between you and Cincinnati.
Yeah. So when I got there, I didn't have scholarship. I just always remembered that coach at Cincinnati for the way he treated me. It just seemed like so wrong, and then knowing that about my high school coach and stuff, the whole thing, it was like there was a scandal there, of very seedy things that was kind of, the lid was kept on it.
It sounded like paybacks for what your sister found out.
Yeah, my sister had said there was some inappropriate behavior going on. But that connects to this coach who connects to Patty Hearst. Cleveland, Indrid Cold. It could be that Indrid, I've always suspected Indrid was a real live, agent of some kind, working for the government or some group. He may have used, if he was involved in Mothman, the lives of Mothman witnesses, perhaps in the case of Harriet being around or my dad being around when people got blown up or jabbed with cancer. Maybe he took her name and used it for Patty Hearst. Mm-hmm. If there's some weird connection there with Indrid Cold and SLA. If he was an operator, he might have been operating on that same wavelength as L. Ron Hubbard and all these other kind of national guys that float around and get involved in different things. That was that point. Nothing against her. I think the focus is on Indrid here. In Cleveland. Mm-hmm. 41. The King's Knight kills the dragon of the people. This is just a phrase I came up with to sum up the dragon lore of England, where the dragon. What if the dragon story is interpreted differently? If the dragon represents, the Garuda represents spiritual independence for the people, who do you have going out to kill the dragons, the emissaries of the church or the state, the knights? And I think there's just a basic symbolism there that there's always this war going on, if you will, between the rulers who want to control this is the key point of Levenda's last book, that they're monopolizing people's experiences with the supernatural, be they religious or otherwise. Because, Christians are really, I think we're all engaged in a spiritual, it's a pseudo-supernatural, if not outright supernatural process where you are interacting with this greater power. Did I finish my point? Oh, the King's Knight kills the dragon of the people. It's the class warfare, almost, in a nutshell. 40. Oh, did I miss 40? No, I had another piece for 40. No, 42.
42.
42. Keel. Underground cities. He gave a talk where he listed these underground cities. Hartford, New Orleans, someplace in the Catskills, which may be Iron Mountain, Alice Springs, which is in Australia, there by that big rock. And I've heard that there's actually a base right under that huge rock, Ayers Rock. It's sort of a very persistent. I guess Keel said that it was actually reported in the New York Times that they had a facility underneath the rock.
Well, the Times also reported, I think we may have talked about this, I believe in 95. The New York Times front page story talked about, actually it asked a question rhetorically of the Soviets, or at that time Russia, why are you guys building this like gigantic facility under the Urals if in fact the Cold War is over? So this is definitely, there's something to it. It's just not urban legend or myth.
There's a technological link between Alice Springs and Sugar Grove, West Virginia, in that they're both part of the Echelon system. So they're sharing information. There's two listening stations.
What system is this? The what?
The Echelon system.
Echelon, right. I got you. Okay.
Yeah. One that Harriet's dad was working on. Number 43, guy who bought a DVD worked on mind control serial killer movie. I had a guy buy my DVD who worked on a mind control serial killer movie. 44, March 19th of this year, the gravel pit event. That's where a bunch of strange things happened to us when we went to a gravel pit that has a shooting range in it. Now, a car broke down, and that same day the U.S. bombed Iraq on the 3rd anniversary of what? That's the 3rd anniversary of the invasion. Original, it must be.
Are we talking about back in 91?
No, we're talking about this year.
Oh.
Bush was hitting the low in the polls. It was down to that 30% or whatever it was. And then so the U.S. decided to start bombing Iraq again on the 3rd anniversary. In order to, that's basically, another mass control op where they, they manipulate the way the news goes to cover up something. But it was also the same day when a weird, I think, kind of almost paranormal kind of day, that for me. Oh, that was also at a time. That's one of those time periods that was in March there, from the 19th to the 23rd, it looks like, that Coleman had predicted some terrorism, and then all of these different things, and that's the first entry, and I'll hit some more here. At 3:20 the next day, Bush, Cheney are in Cleveland, separately. They're not reported as being together in the news, but they're both there. That same day, I got a strange offer from a Cleveland UFO person in my email.
What year are we talking about?
This year.
Okay.
This year, and that I don't know who that was, if that was a reference to Tanya or not. 3:21 the next day, Charlie Sheen comes out with his believing the 911 was an inside job. Bush is in West Virginia that day. The Zebher murder occurs in Minneapolis, and the guy's from Buchanan, West Virginia. He's a 911 truth activist. They call it a random murder. Same day, the Sago Mine. No, it also has in parentheses Sago Mine. So that's close to where the Sago Mine disaster was, where this guy Zebher was from.
Mm-hmm.
Same day, my niece broke her femur and was in the same hospital as the Sago Mine
workers.
That lived. Did he live?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Right. In fact,
that all happened the same day. Pretty amazing. 47. Well, wait a minute. Let's go back to 320. 47 is kind of a random one that was thrown in. It says Nuremberger was the name used by Keel to describe one of the generals that was involved in the UFO, in controlling the UFO movement. So basically they would have these UFO conferences, and military guys would show up, like brass, and this guy's a general, and I believe Keel was referring to Dornberger, because he was the Nazi who had come over, part of Operation Paperclip, was working at Bell Helicopter, which has a connection to JFK, and where the conspirators were possibly working. So Keel does that kind of stuff. He'll make up a goofy name, but there's a clue in it. And so I did not know that Dornberger was involved in UFOs, because we've always just thought it was the Bell Helicopter stuff, and the connection, of course, to Werner von Braun that he had from Germany when they were building the missiles together. So that links Dornberger and Bell Helicopter to NASA security. NASA security has been implicated in the JFK thing through the Torbett document, famous Torbett document. But back to that timeline in March, number 48, March 22nd, Warren Coleman predicts terrorist strike. The same day, there's dog torture in Tacoma, Washington. Big strange story about some tortured dogs. And I was contacted by an agent provocateur who tried to do some things on a public list to I don't know what his idea was, but it was some kind of weird attack from nowhere. 323. Oh, that's 49. Number 49, March 23rd. Discovery Channel shows a show on alien vampires. I think it was called Aliens and Vampires or something. And they show a kitchen entity that had been photographed by one of the witnesses. And I got an email from somebody saying, you got to watch this because it's just like your picture that you posted 2 weeks earlier. Just 2 weeks earlier, I had posted the picture that I had gotten from my sister.
Mm-hmm.
Shows this thing looking in our kitchen window. 2 weeks later, it's broadcast on from Mexico. It was a case in Mexico, I think, that was very similar, where a UFO or whatever, an alien or some kind of creature, I think it was chupacabra, had looked in, or they were calling it a chupacabra, had looked in the kitchen windows. Okay. 50. Anna Genslinger. I talked about her before. She was the researcher who did a book on M.K. Jessup that never really got published. M.K. Jessup was the scientist who was, what was his main thing? He did a lot of different things. The Philadelphia experiment. That's his main notoriety. She said that she discussed mind control and Bluebird, Operation Bluebird, as being involved in somehow, was it with Jessup or with the paranormal? She thought mind control basically was behind some of the UFO stuff. She felt that she had been murdered in a past life. Through her, we found that M.K. Jessup had worked for the government during the Philadelphia experiment. And he'd also worked for the Rubber Development Corporation, which is a Nelson Rockefeller-owned, controlled company. A lot of these rubber companies. We had a rubber company in Charleston that a lot of people worked for that I've written about in some of my blogs and things. That seems to have a connection to this, to one of our power spots, if you will, or paranormal spots at the confluence of the Kanawha and Elk rivers.
What was the name of the rubber company? Do you remember?
Industrial Rubber.
Okay.
And then there's a little side note. Jessup thought the synchronicities were the most disturbing aspect of his research. He was an astronomer who had gotten into studying UFOs and wrote the case for the UFO and the expanding case for the UFO, and was suicided in Coral Gables, but he was from Indiana. And his death was very strange, and Anna Genslinger was getting messages from the other side from Jessup during her research. She felt like she was led to it by him because he had been murdered. 51? Superman has a snake on his chest.
Mm-hmm.
People view it as an S, but it could be also symbolize a snake. And the kryptonite in the Superman story is very similar to the elixir that the Garuda is tempted with. It's the Garuda's only
Achilles heel?
Achilles heel. It's this elixir, and the elixir is it's not a problem for the Garuda to have it, which is of course why he wants more of it, because he can handle the implications of it. It's like a secret knowledge probably about how to control matter and energy some way, I would guess. It's a secret knowledge that the evil, quote, evil people are supposed to be not exposed to. In the Buddhist tradition, there are all these secret teachings that are not supposed to be publicly broadcast, because if the technology falls into the wrong hands, they can cause much more harm. So it takes a certain amount of the Garuda has a certain inner morality that keeps him from going too far with this elixir. But the elixir is highly desired in the Garuda stories by the Nagas, or the giant serpent. The forked tongue of the serpent is said to have been caused by licking the plant that the elixir grows on. It's these sharp reeds. And also, there's 51B, I guess. Army Aviation Association is linked to the Order of St. Michael. I don't remember but I do know that Harriet's dad was Swedish, and he was an aviator in the Army. Plus Our Lady, the Order of Our Lady Loretta with one T, has some Catholic Army link.
That bit about the aviator who was Swedish, For what country did he fly?
Well, he's the guy that lived in our neighborhood. Harriet, the guy that was car bombed, who worked on the Echelon project, had previously been an Army aviator.
Okay.
And he was Swedish.
Right, but he was in the U.S. military?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's also a note, Army Recon, which I think we talked about yesterday. Army Recon was the organization that controlled the paperclip and probably controlled the mind control that the paperclip scientists were doing.
And that was out of Fort Thomas, was that?
Well, that would have been one of the places.
Okay.
One of the offices for Army Recon, or Engineering and Recon. And Sarah Jane Moore was in the Women's Army Corps. That's another note there to go with 52B, or 51B.
Sarah Jane Moore?
Sarah Jane Moore, our Manson-connected assassin.
Assassin, yeah.
Was the Women's Army Corps. Let's see here. 53, okay, I've got 52 is going to have three things in it. 52A, Lanulos is a planet that Woody Derberger and Andrew Cold went to. If you change it around, it means sol annul, light or sun annul, annul the sun or darkness. 50, TNT domes, the TNT area in West Virginia. The domes were sold to Trojan, U.S. Powder Company, after the original use by DuPont, I guess. Also to LSC Chemical and American Cyanamid. Interesting connection to a steel company there, though, which kind of makes you think of other steel companies in the area, like Buckeye in Ohio, which would be Bush controlled.
What are the other steel companies?
Oh, Well, Trojan was the local. My oldest sister's husband had worked at Trojan. He was a Vietnam vet who had seen a lot of combat. I guess I can't remember any of the other.
Did Jones and Laughlin or Republic pop up?
No,
okay.
Doesn't sound familiar. Let's see, 52C. In 1968, a Mothman was seen by a tree in Haymarket, Virginia. This is after the Silver Bridge collapse. This is a Keel reference. This is also where it says Derenberger got the Salem, Oregon message. Oh, it turned out that there was also a UFO flap in Salem, Oregon at the time these MIBs were telling Derenberger that they were from Salem, Oregon. Dan Dreesen, 52C? 52C? Is that right? Dan Dreesen, D-R-I-S-I-N, was another early Mothman researcher who said that the Men in Black were Air Force, were a rumor by the Air Force that they didn't exist. 53. We're getting into a page about Union Carbide. Union Carbide was put on a full court press in late 1942 to get polyethylene made in South Charleston for radar and RF cable. So they made radar cable and RF cable from it. Also synthetic gems that year. Gems come up later in other ways. There's a guy in here who, on Carbide staff, who was a gemist, who was from Sweden, I think. But the gem story comes up in the gemstone file, which connects supposedly some of these assassin cells, like at used aircraft, also had involvement in gems, making fake gems and things. Because they were using these they developed these rubies to use for lasers, and then they also learned they could make other gems. And so it was sort of this whole fake underground of sale of these industrial gems and things, and they use them for various nefarious things, I would suppose, or just for making money.
Oh, I mean, would they sell them as actual rubies?
I'm just guessing that was one of the things that they did with them. They made weapons, strange laser weapons with them. Because there's some stuff, a lot of stuff in the literature in the UFO literature about people getting hit by these rays and dying.
Because the gemstone files.
Famous UFO guy did some study in South America where he found that these remote vehicles are flying around, shooting beams out sideways and killing natives. At that same time, higher up in the canopy of South America, the Rockefellers had a 737 outfitted completely for the purpose of shooting angled radar out to locate minerals. And oil deposits, so they could shoot under the canopy from the side. And they spent millions of dollars on this, and I think it was Goodyear was the company that helped them build it. And Valet thought it was very suspicious, these deaths. He really tried to say it without saying it in the book, that this was some kind of covert op, but I don't think he could really come out and say it, with his stature. But it's interesting that those two things are happening at the same time.
Also, the gemstone files can be read online. That's a pretty interesting read, too.
Yeah. And they're also having a push on, it says here, U.S. Navy plus DuPont plus Lind, which is a division of Union Carbide, LINDE. Those three were together in Tonawanda, New York, working on a project. And I guess this maybe is a gem project.
Yeah, near Buffalo.
Tonawanda, T-O-N-A, Wanda, New York.
Right. That's near Buffalo.
Before, National Carbon, which is a division of Union Carbide, made the first batteries for proximity fuses during World War II. We're back to those proximity fuses again, which we talked about yesterday. Also synthetic gems they were making at National Carbon gemstone file. We talked about that. 1915 in Sauda, Norway, which is up close to Bergen, pretty way up there. Norway, Carbide opened a division, the electrometallurgical division of Carbide, which linked with Cleveland. The Cleveland division set up this division, this place in Norway to serve Europe. So that's as early as 1915. They're already in Europe. And in fact, I think there's some evidence that Europeans were partners in Carbide from the beginning. But this is the part of Norway, of course, where we have the Laplanders, who were the most commonly seen men in black, according to Keel.
My ancestors.
National Carbon went to Mexico and China in 1932, expanded. Also Jakarta, same time. By 1939, they were in Sweden, France, England, Italy, Argentina, Australia, India, New Zealand, South Africa. So that's global coverage by 1932. They have a lab in Long Island City where they made, did I say 57? They have a lab in Long Island City. Skinless sausages were made there. Where they developed skinless sausages in the silicones department. So that's not very...
Yeah, yum.
Doesn't make me want to eat sausage right now.
Mystery bags. Yeah.
58. The Danbury, Connecticut headquarters of Carbide looks like the Swedish crown from the air. And this is true. If you go look at it, you'll see what I mean.
Do you have an...
Carbide is really a Swedish company.
Do you have a site? Do you have a picture of this on your site?
No.
Okay.
I should, though. By the way, here's a little clarification. The guy who bought the cloisters, or built the cloisters, sold to Rockefeller, let's make this 58B. His name is Cornelius Kingsley Garrison Billings. Cornelius Billings. He was in Carbide from 1917 to 1937.
So his outfit actually constructed the cloisters?
I think so. And he was the money behind Carbide. He was the original financier, the big financier. So there's a pretty clear connection between Carbide and some kind of monkish, engagement of the supernatural. You could say that. The cloisters was for meditation, right?
Well, you know, I have to apologize. I actually was up there a number of times when I was doing magazine articles and taking photographs for a motorcycle touring magazine out of California. Mm-hmm. And I have to say I did things quickly. I've really never gone up to the cloisters just to just drink it all in. I mean, I was there and I was hitting photos and making the best out of good weather. I went up there with another individual.
I did the same thing when we went there. I just said, let's go get a drink instead of drinking it in. Because to me, it wasn't that impressive.
It's only the fact that you have something like this inside, let's face it, a pretty decent metroplex. And it would give people pause, a place to go, just to chill out. And it is kind of pretty. And but as far,
Seems like a prison or a place to hide out from attack to me.
Real quick, okay, I know we got about 4 minutes. Well, we got 4 minutes left. I'm going to tell you what happened. Real quick, a friend of mine was working as an investigative assistant to the FBI. He was trying to get into the Bureau, and he did his 3 years as an IA. They were outfitted with cameras, and they were told to go follow Russian emissaries who were really KGB. And what happened was they were following one guy who went up to the cloisters and walked off in the wooded area and met the wife of another agent with whom he made booty. And they caught it all on black and white, and then what they do is they go ahead and they blackmail the one agent, for information. So the cloisters was also known for other things rather than hiding out. Well, maybe it was hiding out. Just a little trivia there for you, Andrew.
Well, let me get my last couple in here. 59. John Moorhead. Let's say John Moorhead was the gym guy for Carbide. He was the U.S. envoy to Sweden. Number 60. The sales staff at Carbide is oriented at Mellon in Pittsburgh, Mellon Lab, trained at Tarrytown, New York, at the research facility there. 61. Prestone is a Carbide product. The Miami Carbide, the guy who built Miami almost was named Carl Fisher. He was a Carbide investor or owner. The things they made Prestone albums, auto glass, like the auto glass that doesn't.
Right, safety glass. Mm-hmm.
Seats for autos. They had a plant in Chicago that was linked to Amoco, which is Standard Oil of Indiana.
The Rockefeller cartel, yeah.
62. The Bound Brook, New Jersey plant made Bakelite. Mm-hmm. Which I talked about earlier. It was invented by a Belgian, and they have a research center today in Bound Brook, New Jersey. 63. UCC chemical. This is Carbide chemical tankers were bought from Standard of Indiana for their Texas operations. And interestingly, 2 days before the Mothman sighting started, there was this is listed in one of the Charles Berlitz Bermuda Triangle books. There was the mysterious loss of a chemical barge heading from Texas to the East Coast.
Beautiful.
This was probably a Carbide tanker that went down 2 days before Mothman.
All right, you get a minute and a half though, Andrew. How you fix there?
64. They made stacks at their plants the same height as far back as the 1920s to discourage terrorism or espionage. 65. The Boudadine for fake rubber, synthetic rubber, was made with Kentucky whiskey during the war from Louisville and Beavers Fall, Pennsylvania.
Jeez.
Pipe racks for the West Virginia's Institute plant came from the 2nd Avenue L in New York City.
That's great.
Yeah. I mean, that's those old tracks, there's still a few there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
They sent the rest of them off to West Virginia.
And you deserve it.
Probably on that train where it said Manhattan on it. It ended up in Manhattan, West Virginia.
So let me do this. Let's hold it over because we got to do a third one anyway. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. So just hang it right there. We'll stop with the where the L wound up from New York City. This is the Grassy Knoll. We've been with Andrew Colvin. The website is andycolvin.com. Andrew, stay with me for a second. Folks, also we'll be doing a part 3 later in the month And we appreciate you listening, and we'll see you soon.